Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stacy Brown, and I will be your instructor for the next 2 hours. I've been with Brittenford Systems for 7 years and I'm a Microsoft Certified Professional in Dynamics GP. I've completed several GP implementations and upgrades and provide GP support for Brittenford clients. Today, we'll be reviewing the setup of EFT, which includes EFT checkbook setup, EFT file format, EFT setup for payables management, set up email remittances to send to vendors for EFTs, and then we'll process those EFT payments. So let's begin. You'll notice here I'm on GP 2013. If you have questions about your version of GP, please feel free to ask questions. There may be some differences as the functionality does change across the versions. All right. The first thing we need to do when we're setting up EFTs is first we need to contact the bank. We need to discuss with them pricing, if there's any additional costs to having an EFT, and we need the EFT file format. Once they send that to us, we can really truly begin the EFT setup process. The first thing you're going to do is set up your checkbook to allow EFTs. So we're going to go over here to the bottom left. We're going to click on Financial. We're going to expand cards. So I'm going to click on this little box with the arrows going outwards. And then under Financials, I'm going to select Checkbook. In the checkbook, if you haven't set up a checkbook ID yet, you can set one up at this time. But right now, I'm just going to set up or review the setup of a checkbook that already exists. So I'm going to select Uptown Trust. Here, you'll know my currency ID is filled out, my cash account. You'll notice that my bank account is filled out as well as my bank account ID. To set up the EFTs, we'll then click on the EFT Bank button. Here, the first thing you'll notice is that when you come to this window for the first time, the selection will be none, and you'll need to change that to your country of origin, and we'll select United States. You can select a country code, but it's not required. An ISO currency code is not required either, but it's good to fill that out. The two main important things here are your transit routing number and your bank account number. If you enter your transit routing number incorrectly, for instance, if I just put in a fake one here, and I tab off, it does validate that your routing number is a valid transit routing number. So I'm going to click OK to this error message, and I'm going to enter in a real routing number. All right. The next thing you're going to do is enter your bank account number. Obviously, this isn't going to be verified, so you want to make sure it's correct. All right. If you're an international bank and you have an IBAN, you can enter in your IBAN. Bank branch, bank code, bank branch code, and bank check digit is all optional. You have your tax registration number and your bank identification number. I tried to fill out as much information as I can just to have it. Here you can enter in the bank company name, the company ID number. You'll see that the small company name shows up, your reference, service class code. The block factor format code and priority code I don't usually change at all. You then have your communication type. You have the choice of either application or internet link. If an application is actually installed on your workstation to be able to upload EFTs to your bank, you can select application and then browse out to the executable. GP will not automatically upload the EFT file for you, but it will activate the application for you. Then you'll have to log in and upload the EFT yourself. The internet link you'll notice changes the title over here on the bottom to FTP site. So if your bank uses an FTP site, you can browse out to the FTP location. Once again, it's not going to automatically upload the file for you. It's just going to browse out to that location first. Then you'll have to enter your user ID and password, and then you'll be able to upload it. Most of my clients I see don't fill this out. They keep it blank, and they will go to the internet and open up an executable from within a secured website with the bank. So I'm going to click on Payables Options. Here, we have to first decide if we want to use an EFT number or a check number. My suggestion is always to use an EFT number, especially since all of my clients print their own checks. Okay, we don't want to waste check stock by using a check number from the checkbook. So we select Use EFT Numbers, and then you have to decide your next EFT payment number. Here you'll notice there's a lot of zeros. These zeros allow the EFT number to increment by 1. Say if we only had EFT 001, we would then have 999 EFTs we could send, and then we'd be getting an error message that we've run out of EFT numbers. So we want to make sure there's a few zeros before the 1. The next option we need to fill out is the file format. You have the option of single format, which will use the same format for all vendors, or you can base it on the vendor. And this allows you to select a different EFT file format for businesses, corporations, personal, or foreign EFTs. Most or all of my clients that I know of use the single format option. All right. The next thing we need to do is we need to select a single format. We haven't set up an EFT format yet, so when I click on the magnifying glass, you'll see I have one. That's an earlier setup I did, but you'll see when you click on that button, you won't see any EFT formats. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to click on the blue arrow. Here we have a few required fields. We have the EFT format ID, description, and format type. So first, the EFT format ID is alphanumeric, so we just enter an ID. So I'll say Uptown, and I'll say Trust because I've already set one up. And then we enter in a description. On the series, you'll notice that purchasing is selected. On the format type, here I believe there's 10 options. You have your Canadian options here at the top, and then below you have your US, your ISO, you have a US IAT, and then a user defined. Most of my clients use one of these 4, is what their bank tells them to use. If you find that one of these formats is similar to the format of your bank but not exactly what you need, you can use user defined, and this will allow you to identify each field in the EFT file format. So I'm just going to select Nacha here. You'll see the flat file selected and grayed out. We can have a format class. Is it non-specified, business account, corporate account, a personal account, or a foreign account? So I'm going to leave it at personal. Max line length is 94. None of this needs to be changed if you're going with the Nacha standard format. All right. You'll notice down here that there are types and descriptions. You have your record type codes, priority codes. These will change with the different types and headers of the EFT. Okay, so depending on your bank's recommendations, you'll be setting up each of these additional informations or lines or segments. If you need to generate an auto settlement for each detail or a detail line appenda, you'll want to make sure those boxes are checked. You'll want to add padlocks if there is a specific, like your bank wants all zeros instead of spaces between each record. So this is pretty much telling the file, okay, I want all zeros to be filled out where I have blanks. If you're using a user-defined field or you need your file to be in a specific delimited field type, you can click on delimit fields and then tell it, okay, do I want comma, tab, space, or other? If you do need to change the delimit field, I suggest going with tab just because if you have a comma in your vendor name or a comma somewhere in the fields, that may cause problems. And I'm just going to click Save in this window. You'll notice the best thing to do is to first set this up in a test company. You will need to send a test EFT file to the bank for their approval before you can go live with EFTs. So what I always suggest is we do this in a test company. We send the EFT file to the bank approves it, and then we can use this nice function where we can export the file format. So if you click on Export here, Import Export, we're going to select Export Format from Current Selection to, and I'm just going to browse to my desktop. I'm going to call this Uptown. Click Open, and then I'm going to click on Export. What that will allow us to do is once we have completed testing in the test company, we can then import that file that was created here into the live company. So we're not having to recreate the wheel. We do everything in test, and then we can just send the file format over. All right. So let's go back to Payables Options. Now that we have our single format, select Uptown here. You have here too EFT Payables Options. Some banks require you to send out a PreNote of the vendor's information prior to sending an EFT for that vendor. So if they do require a PreNote, please check the Payables PreNote required, and then identify the grace period. The grace period is the amount of days between you sending the PreNote and you being able to cut an EFT for that vendor. I'm just going to uncheck this box. The next section below, the default output files. When we generate the PreNotes or generate the EFTs, this is the file location that the file is going to be created in. This needs to be a secure location. In the manual, it suggests that you put it on the C drive. You can put it in your programs folder as long as you're, I think, in Windows 7 or higher. I suggest that you put it on the server somewhere, just in case somebody else needs to get to it. But make sure that your IT guy knows that it's sensitive information and needs to be stored where only specific people have access to it. But for now, today's class, I'm just going to browse out to the EFT folder that I've created. And then you want to click OK. And then click OK. Another thing that you want to be aware of is with your checkbook ID. You don't want your checkbook ID to have any special characters, okay? No exclamation marks, dashes, ampersand signs, stars, no special characters, right? And we'll click Save here. Does anybody have any questions about setting up the checkbook for EFTs? You can ask a question if you go to the top. If you're in full screen, the question, you'll see an orange arrow. You click on the orange arrow and you can see questions. You can fill out questions and submit them there. I'll just give you guys a few more minutes to enter any questions you might have, and we will move on. All right, I have one question that says, how do you install EFT for payables or EFTs for receivables, and how do you verify it's working? EFT for payables was moved into the core dictionary in GP, starting with GP10, and what that means is when GP is installed, so is the tables and the functionality for EFT. It's not considered an additional module or a separate installation. The only requirement is that the module is listed in your registration keys, so you may need to purchase the EFT module depending on your licensing. To activate EFT, you go to GP, Tools, Setup, System, and then Registration. And then here under the registration, you'll want to make sure that EFT is selected. And you'll notice I have it selected below, right here. All right. All right, so now we're going to set up vendor records for EFT. So we're going to go to Purchasing. We're going to expand Cards. And then we're going to go to Vendor. Here under the vendor ID, you select your vendor. So I'm going to select AC Travel. You'll see here your primary addresses. Something you want to be aware of is the address IDs that are associated to the remit to. This is the remit to address that defaults automatically into the vendor invoice. So here we identify that it is remit to. So the next step is to go under Address. We're going to select Remit to. And you'll notice that each address has its own EFT Bank button. And that's because different addresses can mean that it needs to go to a different bank or bank account. So here you can see I've set up another bank. You have your bank name, your routing number, your bank account number. If you choose based on vendor in your company setup, you want to make sure you select the file transfer method, which one it's supposed to be, business, corporate, personal, or foreign. The account type, checking, savings, general ledger, or loans. So we'll select checking, and then you can fill out currency ID and such. If you are setting up the checkbook and the vendors, you need to verify that the currency IDs, the country code, and the bank country or region all match for the same checkbook. Okay. Here you have your termination date. This will restrict you from sending an EFT past that date. And then you can see here I've already uploaded a PreNote or created a PreNote file, so it gives me the date the PreNote was sent. So we'll click OK here. And we'll click Save. And then let's set up another vendor. So let's do Advanced Office Systems. So we'll go back. You can see here the primary is the remit to, so we'll click on Address. Then we'll click on EFT Bank. We'll select the bank country region of the United States. Enter in the bank name and the transit routing number. These routing numbers are not specific to the banks. They're just a routing number I know is correct. So please do not copy this as the routing number. You might be surprised. and then 999-8887. All right. Then you have your IBAN, your bank branch. Those are all information. You'll know the termination date, I'm leaving blank with all zeros. And then the PreNote sent is grayed out, and it is all zeros as well for the date. So we're going to click OK. And we'll click Save. Close this window. And we'll click Save again. Once you set up all your vendors, you need to send a PreNote to the bank so that they approve that the routing number and the account number are correct. So to generate a PreNote, we're going to go to Financials. We're going to go to Routines. And then we have here Generate EFT PreNotes. We'll click on that button. You're going to select the checkbook that you want to print your PreNotes for. And then your PreNote, we'll click Vendor Only, and then your PreNote format ID. And I'll just select the EFT file format that we selected. And then we'll click on Process. If you fill in this record PreNote for any record dates on or before, it'll recreate all the vendors for you. So depending on, if you're recreating some from that did not succeed, or you want to just pull in everything, I would leave this usually as 0 zeros. But if you're in a constant, you're constantly adding people, you run a PreNote every week, you may want the last week's date to be the date you enter here so that you're not adding more records to the file than you need. So we're going to click on Process. And then GP provides you a message that the PreNote file has been generated as in the following location. And you'll notice this is the location that we identified in the checkbook Payables Options setup window where we told it to send the vendor PreNotes. So we're going to click OK here. And then let's browse out and view that PreNotes. We're going to go to Windows Explorer. We're going to expand the C drive. We're going to go to EFT. And then you'll notice here that I have 2 PreNote files because I've created them both today. I created one this morning and then one this afternoon. You'll notice the date here. It's 2017-4/12. On the image that I'm currently using, that's the system date, so that's why the date's there. You'll notice the checkbook ID, and then you'll notice the -000, 1 and 2 are my versions. So if we open this up, you'll notice we have the advanced. Okay. Any questions about setting up a vendor or generating your PreNote? Okay, remember, sometimes your PreNotes to the bank will be rejected. So most common reasons for rejections are incorrect account number, incorrect transit routing number, and selecting the incorrect account type, so checking instead of savings, for example. So you'll want to go back to your vendor, verify the information, and then you're going to go back to payables, so purchasing, cards, and then you're going to go back to the address maintenance window. So let's select the one we had before. And here under EFT, you'll want to make those changes. So like I mentioned, most problems are the account number, so your bank account number here, incorrect transit routing number, or the wrong account type. So you want to make sure checking, savings, general ledger, or loan are correct. After you set up your vendors with EFT. You then need to set up, send a sample EFT file to your bank. So what we'll need to do is we'll need to enter a test voucher and then cut a test EFT and then generate that EFT and send it to the bank. Like I said before, I like to do all of this in test first. That way I'm not affecting the live system production at all. And then once they approve it, I just import and export the file type, so we're good to go. So let's send an EFT file. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to purchasing. We're going to go to transactions. We're going to enter in a transaction entry. So here I'm going to enter an invoice. I'm going to do a transaction level posting. That is not common in most companies. Most companies do batch level posting, but for the sake of time, I'm going to do transaction level posting. We'll select advanced. We'll notice the remit to address on the vendor invoice. We'll enter in our document number. And then we'll enter in a purchase amount. I usually do something like $1 or $20 depending on the system. If I'm having to do this in live, which I don't like to do, I do $1. And the test company, I just make up an amount. Usually it's a large amount just to make sure the numbers fill in correctly. So I'm going to go with 8,000. Just like anything else, you want to select your distributions. Here you can see my expense account defaulted as well as my payables account. And then I'll post the transaction. Print all my posting journals. And then the next thing we need to do is we need to enter select checks. So we're going to go to select checks. We're going to create a new one. We'll click add this batch. And then the key here when you're sending your EFTs is you want to make sure the payment method is EFT. If a vendor is marked for EFT, but the payables batch entry payment method is selected as check, a check will print for that vendor. So we'll select EFT here and we'll select our checkbook ID. And we'll click Save. Here, I'm going to select my specific vendor, Advanced, and click Insert into the restriction, and then finally click Build Batch. We'll know the batch is done building when the batch total changes from 0 to an amount. We can see that the batch is pulling in more than the $8,000 transaction that I entered. So I'm going to click on Edit Check Batch. I'm going to highlight Advanced by clicking on the name. And I'm going to uncheck everything that's not my 8,000. I want my EFT file to be clean, so I try to only use one transaction. So I'm going to click on Process. You'll notice when an EFT batch is ready to process that we do not have a print option here. And you'll notice that our check number is pulling from our payables options, so it's actually saying to use an EFT number. We'll verify the GL posting date. You'll want to make sure the separate remittance button is checked, and then we'll click Process. This will open the Process Payable Remittance window. We'll click on Remittance Form. Then you have two options. You have your destination. You have print the documents, so you're going to print them, fold them, send them off to the vendors, or you send the document in an email. And we'll go over setting up the email so that you can send those via email to your vendors. You will not be able to post an EFT until you print the remittance forms. If you click on Post and click Process, it'll tell you that you have not printed your remittance form yet. So we're going to click on Process. If you have Word templates available, templates will default for you. If you do not have Word templates deployed, you can use the standard report. And I'm just going to send mine to screen because I do not have a printer associated with this image. You'll notice, just like the checks payable batch window, the process payables remittance window pops back up, and this is where you get to choose to click post. All right, so we want to review the remittance. Everything looks good. Yay, we're sending them $8,000. We close the window, and then we click process to post. And then we have our posting journals. All right, so we have our posting journal. And then to generate the file, we are going to go to Purchasing, Transactions, and then Generate EFT File. You will not be able to generate the EFT file until the batch is posted. All right, so we're going to click Generate EFT File. The series that we're selecting is Purchasing. We're going to select our checkbook. We'll have our transmission and settlement date. You'll notice the batch available is our webinar batch that we just created and posted. So we'll select that batch, and then we'll click Generate EFT File. We have now gotten a message from GP that one transaction was created in the EFT file, and this is the location and the name of the file, and to review and transmit that file to the bank. So we have not sent this to the bank yet. We have just generated the file. Now, if you had your application, that communication link filled out, so under purchasing, financial, cards, checkbook, if we selected that checkbook here, we went to EFT Bank. If we had the communication type, that's when GP would have opened either the application or tried to open the FTP site for you. All right. But since we have nothing selected, it just gave us that message that said, hey, we need to send the file. You have not sent the file yet. So then we can open up Windows Explorer, go to the C drive, EFT, and then you can see here's my EFT file at the top. And we can open it up, and you can see here my tab delimited file. All right. We can then send that to the bank, and the bank can transmit, can review the file. Usually when you're sending the test EFT, it's to a test site, and then once the bank approves it, they'll make the live site for you to upload available to you. Usually they have that kind of stuff locked down. There is a payment registry for EFT report that can be printed for you. So to make sure you have availability to that EFT report, you need to go to GP, Tools, Setup, Posting, and then Posting. Here you're going to select the series Purchasing and the origin of computer checks. You won't want to mess with anything up here because that affects how the system functions within GP. What we're really concerned about is these reports down here. We want to go down to the bottom and make sure EFT Payment Registry is checked and that where we want it to print is selected. Here we have question marks, so it's going to ask you every time the EFT needs to be printed. You have the screen to a printer or to a file. All right. This is also where you guys can go as extra information to remove posting journals that you guys don't use as a company to save on paper. So if you don't use the computer check posting journal, you can uncheck that report and it won't print every time you post. I have several clients who they always are constantly clicking cancel on reports when they're posting. And it's just as easy as just unchecking the box here and they don't have to deal with it every time. All right. So that is sending the test EFTs. Now I want to talk about going through the system and the conditions to sending an EFT payment to a vendor. So first, an EFT vendor record has been created for each vendor. A PreNote must be sent for each vendor prior to the current date minus the PreNote grace period for the checkbook you're creating EFT payments from. Each EFT vendor record has to be active. The termination date for each vendor hasn't passed, so you want to continue to have that at 00 unless your relationship with the vendor is terminated. The checkbook has been set up to use EFT, and the EFT's Payables module is registered. Does anybody have any questions at this time? So we've set up the checkbook, we've set up a vendor, and we've sent a test EFT file. Give you guys a few more minutes to enter questions. All right, I got a question. What does PPD and CCD mean for the standard US NACHA files, and what does the plus mean next to it? So if we go back to purchasing, we go back to cards, vendor, we'll select advanced again. We're going to click on address, and then we'll click on EFT Bank. Oh, excuse me, wrong place. Getting ahead of myself. We're going to go to financial, cards, checkbook. We're going to select the checkbook Uptown Trust and click on EFT Bank, and then Payables Options. And here we have our single format. So if we click on this blue arrow, that'll open up the format setup. Here they're asking about this NACHA CCD here. So if we select here, you can see them below. All right, so PPD means prearranged payment and deposits. It's used to credit or debit a consumer account, popularly used for payroll direct deposits and pre-authorized bill payments. CCD means corporate credit or debit, primarily used for business and business transactions. And then the plus sign besides the PPD and the CCD mean that the file format includes mapping for the appenda line types. So it just includes more information in your EFT file. Most of my clients use the NACHA CCDs as their file format. Any other questions before we move on? All right, so let's talk about entering a manual EFT payment. We'll use the Payables manual payment entry window to enter EFT payments. EFT payments post to the bank reconciliation as a check, but duplicate check numbers aren't verified. If you've marked the Enable DDR or European Electronic Funds Transfer option in the Company Setup Options window, and you are recording EFT transactions with the EFT payment option selected, the cash in transit account from the checkbook will be used. We didn't go over the Enable DDR and the European Electronic Fund Transfer. Most of my clients do not use that, if any of them. So what we'll want to do is we'll go to purchasing, transactions, and then manual payments. Here you can enter in a payment number, select your vendor ID, so we'll select advanced. You'll see EFT is selected for us, and then the checkbox for electronic. We enter in the document number. We enter in the amount. And then we can post the individual transaction. All right, so we'll click post here. And we'll close the window. I'm just going to click cancel on my payment posting journals. The next way you can create an EFT is by creating an EFT with your payment batch. So we're going to start by going to transactions, and then we're going to scroll down to the bottom and select batches. We'll enter in a batch ID. You know what? The first thing we should do is create an invoice. So let's go to transaction entry. And we'll create several invoices here. I'm going to do AC travel, which I know EFT is set up for. And I'm going to post that. And then I'm going to select another invoice for advanced. All right. And we'll post that as well. So now we have a couple of invoices too for those vendors to check off and print. All right. So to create a check batch, we're going to go under batches. We're going to enter in a batch ID. And we're going to select our origin of computer check. And then you have your payment method. Is it check or EFT? Remember, if check is selected, even though you have the EFT information set up for the vendor, a check will still be printed. So you want to select EFT. Verify your posting date and your check date. If your checkbook ID does not default for you, or you need to change your checkbook ID, you'll do so here. And then you'll click Save. Now we can go to the Select Checks window. So we'll go to Select Checks. We'll select our batch ID. Then we'll want to restrict the checkbook, the batch, to only our EFTs. There's a couple of different, two different ways primarily that my clients sort EFT vendors from non-EFT vendors. If they're not putting vendors into specific classes for any other reason, they will use the vendor class ID to sort EFTs to non-EFTs. Or we've also used the payment number, payment priority field. So in the vendor maintenance window, under options, you can select what their payment priority is. They've used that as well to restrict for EFTs. So we'll just select vendor ID. And here we'll select AC travel. And then you'll want to select one check per vendor. If you have automatically apply existing unapplied here, your payments, credit memos, and returns, you'll still want to fill this information out below like you did in your check run. And then you'll click Build Batch. We'll know the batch is completed when the batch total changes from 0 to an amount. So here we're at 100. We'll click on Edit Check Batch because I only added AC Travel and I want to add Advanced. But I only want to add this $150 check. So we'll check that box as well. And then we'll click on Process. All right. You'll notice again, just like when we were generating the EFT for testing, that we have no print button here. So we're going to click on Process. We have our remittance window that opens up. We're going to click on Remittance Form. Like before, you can print the document or send the document in an email. We'll go over that email functionality in just a second. And then we'll click on Process. We'll select to go to screen. close. Because I used the Word template, that's why it opened up in Word. All right. Let's close that out, and then we'll click Post and process the document. I'm going to cancel some of these posting journals and then let you see the EFT payment registry. So here we have our typical check posting journal, and then here is our EFT payment remittance. So it's telling us what the transit routing number was, the bank account number, and the amount that was sent to in the file. All right, now that we've posted the EFT batch, we now have to generate the EFT file. So we're going to go to Generate EFT File. Again, that's under Purchasing, Transactions, and then Generate EFT File. We're going to select a series of purchasing and our checkbook of Uptown Trust. You'll now notice that I have two batches. This batch ID of SA. This was the manual payment transaction that I entered at the beginning of this section that I didn't post with a batch ID. I just did a transaction level posting. So it used my ID in GP as my batch ID. And then you'll notice my computer checks batch here that has the two payments. So I'm going to select both batches to be included in my EFT. I'm going to click Generate EFT File. And then again, it's going to show us the transaction file has been generated with 3 transactions and is in the following location. Review the file and transmit to your financial institution to complete the transfer. So we'll click OK. And then we come here, and we go to the C drive, EFT, and then you'll notice the second file here. And then we have 3 transactions. So we have 1 for the manual payment and then the 2 invoices that I entered, the 2 computer checks that we set up. Does anybody have any questions? You can modify an EFT check prior to printing or processing and posting, just like you do a check using the EFT check batch window. All right. Now I want to talk about correcting or let's talk about EFT inquiries. So you can use the Payables Transaction Inquiry vendor window to see which payments were made using EFT. So if we go to Purchasing and then Inquiry here, you can go Transactions by Vendor, and then we can select AC Travel. And then if we scroll to the bottom, here you can see my EFT that we printed. All right. To avoid a historical EFT, so non-prepayment, so you would go to Transactions, you go to Void Historical Transactions, and then you can select the document number, which should probably be at the very bottom because it starts with a letter. So here we go. Tab off, and then we can click Void. Remember, just like voiding a check, that your void date and your posting date should be in the same month, if not the same date. Okay, and that's for reconciliation purposes. You don't want a reconciliation item because your void date, which affects the AP, is different than your posting date, which affects the general ledger. Anybody have any questions? We're going through the material very fast, so it'll probably be another maybe 10 minutes and then class will be done unless people have questions. All right, so I believe starting in version 10, you were able, it may be 2010, you may have been able to send emails to vendors for your EFT. So the first thing you need to do to be able to send emails is you need to go under Administration. You want to go under Setup. And under the company, you want to select Email Settings. All right. Here at the top, you have Select Email Document Options, Embed Documents in the Message of the Body, or Send Documents as Attachments, and then you have your file format types. So your DocX is a Word document, HTML, PDF, and XPS. Okay. Most of my clients use PDF, but during the testing phase, I typically use DocX or HTML. All right, if you use PDF or XPS, you need to, you're required to have Word 2010 loaded on your workstation. All right, so then we're going to click on Enable Email, so we'll click on Purchasing Series. And then here, we check the box. We want to make sure vendor remittance is selected, and then we have a message ID. All right. And then you have your replies sent to button. So here, I think the email on this image is phyllis@contoso.com. And then allow changing reply to address at entry, allow updated email at entry. And then you can go to vendor setup. All right. To change or view the email message, we're going to click OK here as well. You go to Email Message Setup. You select the message ID, so we had remittance. And then you can see here the subject line will be remittance enclosed, and then it'll say, hello, attached is your remittance for our most recent check run. Please review the remittance for accuracy. If you have any questions, please contact us. You can add dynamic fields into the message, so it's not going to let me here, but let's see. Let's go back and change the remittance to be purchasing here. There we go. So here we have some dynamic fields we can select. So we'll select additional fields, and then we should have this field box available to us. And we would be able to add like the vendor name, the amount. So let's see, vendor remittance. And then here we have our field here. We can add check comments, check totals. I do a word or precaution to you guys. The check total is actually going to show 4 decimal places. It is something that Microsoft knows about. It hasn't been updated. It's actually pulling a field from the back end, and that's why you see 4 decimal places, even though you only see 2 within the front end of GP. Okay, so it's just pulling from the database the amount. It's not formatting it to the correct decimal places. All right, so you can add a lot of fields here. All right, so here I can say hello and then insert the vendor name, all right, to make it more personalized email. So we'll click Save there and close out. The next step you need to do to set up a vendor is go under Purchasing, and then under Cards, and then under Addresses. You'll want to pull up the remit to address that you're using for the EFT. So here it's going to be the primary address. And we're going to click on the little world icon. In earlier versions, it was the letter I, lowercase I. So you want to click on that. And then under Internet Information, you want to select a To account. All right. When I'm setting this up, I always set it up to send it to myself first for testing, and then we go in and change all the vendors to live addresses. So we'll click Save here, and then click Save. All right, we have a question on the floor. Under what circumstances do you need to apply? I thought GP did that with EFT. When you're building a check batch, it's going to apply to invoices just like when you're printing or processing checks. With the manual payments, there's two ways you can do it. You can do a manual payment as a prepayment where you're not applying it to anything until a later date, and then or you can apply it during the entry of the manual payment. I hope that answers your question, Jan. If it doesn't, please update the questions and I'll try to elaborate a little further. All right. So now that we have the vendor set up, let's enter some transactions and send the EFT. So we're going to expand transactions again, and just like before, we'll enter a transaction, an invoice for the vendor. We'll select my advanced vendor, enter in a document number, enter in an amount, and then click Post. We'll cancel through the posting journals since it's for a vendor invoice. Now we can do two things. We can enter the manual payment or we can do the select checks. I'm going to do select checks in a different way. I'm going to go under Edit Check Batch. I'm going to enter in my batch ID, so email EFTs. Since email EFTs is not an existing batch ID, it's asking me, do you want to add this batch? I click Add. I want to make sure I change the payment method to EFT, and then select my checkbook, and then I'll click Save. And when I tab off, the Edit Payables Check Batch window will open up for me to select what vendor I want to pay. So I'm going to select Advanced, and I'm going to select this $50,000 check, and I'm going to click on Process. And then we'll review. We'll see that the check number is incrementing correctly to EFT 04. We'll verify our GL posting date and our check date, and then we'll click on Process. Here we'll print our remittance form first, and then we have our destination. Do we want to print the document or send the document in email? I'm going to select Send a Document, and I'm going to uncheck Print Document. You'll notice in the parentheses, it does say if an email cannot be sent, it will print. So we're going to, one thing you also want to know before I click Process is you'll notice I have Outlook open. You need the Outlook profile open on your workstation for you to be able to send EFT emails, okay? So that's very important. Make sure your Outlook profile is A, installed on the workstation, because some people use remote desktop to access GP. So you want to make sure an email profile is loaded on the workstation. And you want to make sure you can access that EFT Outlook profile. So you want to be able to open it up and see any incoming and outgoing items. All right. I'm going to minimize my Outlook, and then I'm going to click on Process. And then it's going to ask where you want the exception report to send. This is going to tell you how many emails failed or did not or went through, okay? So we're going to click the screen. We're going to click OK. And then the separate remittance will click screen as well. We can see that mine printed, and we'll see that the document failed, and it says this document type cannot be sent an email for this vendor. So we need to go back to the vendor setup window. And there's one step I forgot to tell you about, and that's this little email button here. You want to click on email. You want to send attachments, send documents as attachments. And then you want to select enable vendor remittance. And then what format you want to send it in. So we'll send it as a document. All right. So then close, and we can go back to process remittance. We'll select my batch. We'll click Remittance Form. On Check Print Document, we'll select Send Document, and then we'll click Process. We'll send the exception report to the screen. And then you can see here the document errors are 0. We have the vendor ID, the payment number, and the document sent successfully. And you know the document sent successfully because now you can open up your Outlook and you can go to your sent items. If we go to our sent items, we see the written and closed email, okay? So you can see here, hello, Advanced Office Systems, because that's the vendor I was sending the EFT to, so it's personalizing my email. It says, attached is your remittance from our most recent check run. Please review the remittance for accuracy. If you have any questions, please contact us. And then they can open the document, right? And this is going to be what they see when they open the document. Once you send the EFT remittances, you can then post the remittance and generate your EFT. So we'll process the posting. We'll close the window. And then we have our EFT here with our information. We can then go to Generate EFT File, go to Checkbook ID, Uptown Trust, select my email, batch, and click Generate EFT File. And then we can see by going to the folder and then the C drive and the EFT file folder that we have a third payment upload file that I can process. Does anybody questions about the email functionality with EFTs? Does anybody have any questions about EFTs in general? All right, I have one question. It says, if a value does not fill the entire field in the EFT file, how do you fill the rest of the field with zeros or spaces? So in the EFT file maintenance window, there's a pad char field on each line. Leave this field blank if you want the field to have spaces, or put a 0 in this field if you wish for an unused portion of the field to be padded with zeros. The zeros will be padded in the remainder of the field based on whether you set the data in the field to be right or left justified. Okay, so if we go back to financial, and then under cards, we can go to the EFT file format here, so we don't have to go through the checkbook. We can just go to cards, financial, EFT file format. We select the EFT file format ID, and then you can see here your pad char is where you would add the zeros. So you'd want to add zeros for every field in the report, and you'll want to change each line type and make sure it's all filled out correctly as well. Another question we have, where do you find the email setup window again? Okay, you're going to go to GP, Tools, Setup, Company, and then Email Settings. Or you can go to Administration in the bottom left corner of your screen, expand Setup, and under Company, go to Email Settings. This is where you set up the generic company email information about whether you want to append, embed the document in the email or attach it. And then you have each series, your sales series and your purchasing series will allow you to email. I believe it started in 2010. It may have started one version earlier, which was 10. But I definitely know 2010 and 2013 both had the email set up. Right. Everybody should be on GP 2010 or GP 2013. Just as an announcement, GP 10's Microsoft's support of GP 10 is ending or has already ended. So if you're on GP 10, not GP 2010, GP 10, you'll want to look to upgrade. GP 2010 and 2013 are the current major versions that are supported by Microsoft. So both of those should have the email setup window available. Any other questions about email setup? Remember, you can change the email message by going to email message setup, which is right below the email settings. And when you select the message, the remittance, you'll see that I had to select purchasing and I had to select a doc type of vendor remittance. And then I had that ability to change the fields to what I wanted them to include. Any questions? All right, I'll be online for the next few minutes. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to contact me through the questions, or you can send me an email to sbrown@brittonford.com. If you would like CPE credits for this class, please email J Mahoney, that's JMAHONEY @brittonford.com. And Brittonford is BRITTEN, F as in Frank, ORD. So jmahoney @brittonford.com. All right, I'll be online for a few more minutes.